Well, I'm definitely not the brand. I mean, the brand is Buckeye Lacrosse, and I think the brand is, a program, and we talk about what is Buckeye Lacrosse, and, the humility of a young man who grew up in southern Maine, who was a Division III player, who came here as a volunteer and now is leader. And I want our players to take on that same, humble approach.
The life and coaching experience of Nick Myers, the head lacrosse coach at Ohio State. And Nick, I want to thank you for agreeing to come on the show.
Grateful for having me, Fred. I'm looking forward to the opportunity to chat, and again, just excited for the opportunity.
Nick, how did you get into coaching?
For me, I grew up with educators, for parents, and went to Springfield College in Massachusetts, and majored in physical education. Was certainly passionate growing up about sports, played 3 different sports, played lacrosse in college, and, at Springfield, you're surrounded by incredible educators and coaches, teachers, and, just felt like it was probably my sophomore, junior year where I was working a lot of camps and, just had the opportunity to be exposed to some incredible people that I really felt like I knew I wanted to transition after college really into the coaching realm versus maybe getting right into teaching. And so to me, there's a huge crossover between the two, and that's kind of where the whole, I guess the fire really started for me in efforts to try to coach long term.
What's the best major, in your opinion, to be a coach?
That's a great question. I would say this. I mean, I think, having a background where you're trained to work with, young men and women. I think whether that's communications, whether that's teaching, I feel like I can only speak to my training that I got at Springfield. And I know that for me, the opportunity that I had to lesson plan and to work with a variety of different kids, to be exposed to different types of challenges as not only an educator but a motivator, someone that just like I said, got exposed to a lot of different types of experiences in my time at Springfield. And now having been in coaching and have had some incredible assistants, I've had players move on to coaching. I think priding myself as a coach to not only to develop players but to develop people. And if someone has a passion to get into coaching, whether they're a history major, a communications major, a PE major, at the end of the day, you have to have a real passion to work and develop young men and women. And I think if you do, then you have a bright future in coaching.
Nick, I have been doing a series called Cortland State, the Cradle of Coaches. There's been so many great coaches coming out of Cortland State in New York. Does Springfield, I would imagine, because I see it as the same type of great undergrad education majors, do you guys have that same kind of legacy as far as coaches in the profession?
I don't think there's any doubt. I mean, I think when you look across the Division I landscape, Division III, the number of coaches that have come out of Springfield, not just in lacrosse, but in a variety of sports, is pretty incredible.
Who are the people that you coached under before you became a head coach?
I think for me, it started with my stepfather. Honestly, I don't necessarily think I coached under him, but growing up in my house, he was a coach. My mom, remarried, and that was where I really got a firsthand experience at coaching every day. And saw him. He ripped off 10 consecutive state championships in a row, and being in my house and being a part of all those seasons and going and being ball boys, and that's where I think again I was really inspired by not only lacrosse but by the coaching aspect of it. I played for Keith Bugby at Springfield, as I mentioned, and that was a really special experience, as well as Jason Miller, who's the head coach of St. John's now. John Klopacki, who's the head coach of Western New England, just won his 300th game. Those were the 2 GAs at Springfield at the time that I was there. Both have gone on to be great coaches of their own right. And then I had the opportunity at 21 years old to start here at Ohio State under Joe Bresci. And, a gentleman who you're familiar with, Fred, I know, and he was incredible. My brother had taken a chance to come out here at Ohio State to be one of Coach Bresci's first scholarship classes. And then I came out 2 years later, kind of followed my brother, and Coach gave me the opportunity to be his first volunteer. At that time, that was a relatively new role in a lot of Division I programs. You were starting to see, that position develop. And I had 2 incredible years under Coach Bresci, 2 probably the most impactful years I've had in coaching, those first 2 seasons in terms of just understanding, what it was all about and really making a decision for myself if this is what I wanted to do.
A lot of people who are considering the coaching professions may not necessarily know about the sacrifices. Unpack some of the sacrifices that put you in the position you are now to be the head coach.
Again, growing up in my house with parents that were teachers, it was never really about how much money you have. I think my brother and I had, I would say humble beginnings, but I certainly feel like we were a blue-collar family, and we certainly always got everything we needed. But I feel like our parents really prided themselves in defining success on more than just the financial scenarios, if you will. And when I went on to college, I understood when I went to Springfield College what that meant in terms of loans. And when I graduated, I had a great deal of money to pay back, as well as support that I did receive from my parents along the way. And so I think the tough decision for me was when I went to Ohio State, knowing I was turning down probably at that time a $45,000 job in Connecticut, which when you're 21, that's like $1 million, Dr. Opie. I mean, that's a huge amount of money. And so I think that was really hard for my parents to understand, but I just felt so passionate about chasing this coaching dream and realized if I was going to do it, I need to go to a great university, a great athletic department, and be around someone really special. And I felt like Ohio State at that time checked all those boxes. I worked several different jobs. I won't get into all those, but I had 5 or 6 uncomfortable jobs that I did just to make ends meet, so I could, coach in the mornings with Coach Bresci and spend as much time in the office as I could those first couple of years. And I wouldn't change it for the world. Like I said, if anything, those sacrifices just make you commit more to the profession and force you to make a decision on whether or not this is really for you, and it absolutely did in my case.
Yeah, and those are the kind of things I'm talking about. I'm hearing you, and Coach Bresci said the same thing. The jobs he had to have when he was an assistant, the salaries that he had back then. It sounds like the profession, particularly in the field of lacrosse, has compensated people much better than in the past. But a lot of people start off with some very meager salaries, and if you're talking about raising kids or being married, it can be very tough.
Yeah, and I think it's I also feel like to a degree, at least at Division I level, there hasn't been an explosion of growth. I mean, certainly there's been programs in the last 5 or 6 years that have been added, but not that necessarily translates to the growth at the grassroots level, and certainly across our country. So what you're seeing is just more and more folks wanting to maybe get into the profession and coach, and less and less opportunities. So therefore, you've seen more and more of these volunteer opportunities. Certainly the club circuit has exploded in the last 10 years. So I do think there's more financial opportunities than ever before. At the same time, I think if you want to talk specifically about coaching, I do think it's very competitive. At the time that I got into it, there was no real blueprint on like, well, hey, if you take this job, then this will lead you to this job. And, you have to just, like I said, surround yourself with great people. I was very fortunate at a young age to be in a great situation with a great teacher and mentor in Joe. And, things kind of fell in place for me. I was scheduled to go back to Springfield College to be with my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, when I finished my second year at Ohio State and work on my master's. And that was kind of a done deal in my mind. And at the last minute, an opportunity opened at Butler to be the head assistant. And, I interviewed for the job. And next thing I know, my girlfriend and I were moving to Indianapolis. And I spent 2 really special years at Butler, which were also super impactful for me before coming back to be Coach Bresci's head assistant in 2005. So, again, to that point, as far as the sacrifices made, I wouldn't change it for the world. And I think they harden you. They commit you to the day-to-day in terms of what it is. And, the one thing that I've seen with some of my athletes recently is, this particular group of this generation, if you will, that's coming through is there is kind of a want it now type approach. I think, just reiterating to them the importance of making sure that you're not compromising yourself for financial gain, for an opportunity that at first glance looks great, but maybe, isn't necessarily something that you want to be really passionate about, and how important it is to be around great people and how important it is to be inspired by what you do every day. And I mean, getting up at 6 a.m. every morning in Ohio as a 21-year-old right out of college, I loved it. I mean, I couldn't wait to get to practice. I couldn't wait to get out there and blow the whistle. It made the afternoons and evenings grueling at times because I had to go back to work to pay rent. But, like I said, if you love what you're doing, it doesn't feel like work, and I think that's where I was very fortunate. And I encourage my guys as they get into the workforce to take that same kind of approach. It's like, hey, sacrifice when you're young. 21 to 26 is a time to kind of bite the bullet and put yourself in a position so that you can be involved in a profession that you truly are passionate about.
For more interviews and related content, you can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, and other podcast distributors. Also, check out our website at www.fredopie.com. Ask questions on Facebook at Frederick Douglass Opie and on Twitter at Dr. Fred D. Opie. For information about advertising on the show, please email us at fdopie@gmail.com. That's fdopie@gmail.com.
Hey listeners, if you're enjoying this episode, check out Fred's conversation with Coach Myers on the Training Table. Training Table episodes are available on SoundCloud and any other platform you're using to listen to our shows. Fred and Coach talk about growing up in Maine eating lobster, the nutrition program for Buckeye lacrosse players at Ohio State, and Fred's experience playing on the U.S. national lacrosse team.
So we've broken our roster really into three groups. You're a cheetah, you're a lion, or you're a bear. And that's more specific with your body type, your performance. And so, and that's not, I mean, we need all three to be successful. It's not a knock to be a bear or a cheetah. But I think, what we've tried to really focus on is, cheetahs need different protocols than a bear. So I think really trying to customize our workouts, customize our diets.
Now back to the show. Tell me about the transition from being the assistant coach to the head coach at a place like Ohio State for you. In my point of view, being the assistant coach was the job. I loved it. I was the good cop. It was great. So tell me about that transition that's involved in many ways from taking on a lot of more responsibility, and also buck stops there. And also transition many times is from bad cop to good cop and vice versa.
Yeah, no, you make a lot of great points. I think for for me, that I came back to be with Joe in 2005. We had 3 really special years together. He approached me when he called me at Butler. I'll never forget that day where he said, "Nick, I want to bring you home, and I want to I want to develop a partnership with you here." And that meant the world to me to hear from him. And I felt that way, as an assistant. That although I was certainly his assistant, that there was a partnership in a sense that we were doing it together. And I've learned so much, from Joe in terms of the way he's done things, the way he's managed himself, not only as a head coach but also as a great father, a great husband. He taught me a lot, and it's something I aspire to be good at. I've got a lot of work to do at all 3, but now as a dad and a husband and certainly a coach, I reflect a lot on things that I learned. And at the time in 2008, again, I'll never forget. You remember these defining moments in your path. But I was coming home from Canada. I knew Joe had gone down to Chapel Hill to take a look. We had a really good year. We had beaten Cornell in the first round, Ivy League champs in the tournament, and then gone on and lost to a very good Duke team that year. And so I think there was a lot of momentum around the program. We had things really going in the right direction, but it's his alma mater, and it was a special place, and I knew that he had to go down there and at least look. And when I got off the plane from Canada, I got a call, and he asked me to come over to his house. And I don't know if I've actually ever shared this story, publicly, but, it was one of those things where my wife picked me up at the airport, and we went over to his house, and we just had a really intimate talk about, what he felt like was the best thing for his family at the time. And he also was I think the hardest thing for him, and sincerely, was having to understand that it would probably put my livelihood up in the air, and what I always remember is that he assured me that, listen, hey, if things aren't going to work for you as the head coach at Ohio State, you're going to be with me in Chapel Hill. And that meant a lot to me, at the time, that I meant that much to him, that I was that big of a priority. And so it gave me a lot of confidence going into the process. I was an internal candidate. I did not get given the job by any means, although I felt like I'd had a 3-year interview. This is Ohio State, and I was 28. And I respected that. They brought in 3 other great head coaches. There was a 3-month window where we did lose a recruit or 2. Publicly, one of the guys we lost went to your alma mater, and Joe Marasco. He was committed to us for over a year, so it was challenging. We felt like we were losing a little bit of the work that we had gained, but went through the process. Ultimately, ended up winning the job, which was probably the best thing for me. I felt like at that point I had the confidence that I had just gotten it. I had to earn it and go out and actually win it. Joe obviously went on and is doing big things at Carolina. And for me, that first year there was a lot of growth. As you said, when you transition behind a different desk, the buck stops with you, and you're following a leader that's probably as well liked as any coach we've ever had here at Ohio State, like Joe Bresci in the department and with his players. it can be really challenging, and I think the one thing that Coach said to me and the advice I got from a couple of colleagues was, you can't be Joe Bresci, but you got to be Nick Myers, and you got to be the best version of yourself, and you're going to learn, you're going to stumble, you're going to fall. I had great captains that year in Joe Delgarno and Scott Matthews, and I'll never forget those first guys that I had that stuck with me and believed in me here. But I think at the end of the day, I've grown up a lot, and I think you learn, you develop, you reflect on each season. I look back at the leader I was in 2009 and hopefully that guy I am now, and I think I've changed dramatically. I'm grateful for the players that have been patient and families in terms of that growth. But I think that's all of us, and at the same time, I think Buckeye Lacrosse is certainly a really special program to me. I've been a part of now 13 seasons here, starting from basically an unpaid volunteer to now the head coach. So
wow, I mean, Coach, that is huge. I mean, that is.
Yeah, well, it's special, because I do think, like I said, there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that have gone into this, and my brother having played here too, and we feel like we're on the verge of really being, really strong program. We want to continue to prove that, but more importantly, we want to do all the right things, on and off the field. I mean, we just finished our 8th season. I got the grade this week with a 3.0 or higher.
Wow.
As a human of GBA, and we had over 500 hours of service again this year in the community. So, as you know, Dr. Opie, it's more than just that. I mean, this is a program that I feel really strongly about, and they've been very loyal to me, and I certainly feel the same way.
I've been a professor going on 16 years, and I had to sit back and say, okay, what is it that I do that makes me very good at what I do? What are the things I need to cut out of my life that are not me? What is my brand, essentially? Tell me about that process of you. When you look at it and you think about your imprint on the program, what is it and what makes Nick Myers the brand for Ohio State lacrosse?
Well, I'm definitely not the brand. I mean, the brand is Buckeye Lacrosse, and I think the brand is, a program, and we talk about what is Buckeye Lacrosse, and, the humility of a young man who grew up in southern Maine, who was a Division III player, who came here as a volunteer and now is leader. And I want our players to take on that same, humble approach, and we're humble warriors. We're very confident. We certainly believe in our ability to play with the very best there is. And at the same time, we don't want to, pound our chest and tell people about it. We want to make sure that we understand that we represent one of the strongest brands in college athletics. And Gene Smith is one of the most, I don't know how well you know Mr. Smith, Dr. Opie, but he's an incredible leader. He's a man that I've been fortunate now to be around, again, 10 plus years. And, this department, people sometimes see us as 36 sports and just this massive entity, but at the end of the day, there's some incredible people here, and I've basically grown up as a young adult from 21 now to 36 in this athletic department. Mm-hmm. And so I've been very fortunate in a lot of ways to experience a number of different things. But, what I've taken from it is, this brand is very special. Like I said, it humbles you in terms of what you need to do in efforts to represent it. And I think as a head coach, I've really taken a lot of things from a lot of the leaders that are here.
I think the whole idea of people, the most important asset is what I hear you saying, and I agree 110%.
I've had guys that have been able to share with me and, say, Coach, hey, listen, we love this about you, and when I'd love to see you, I just surveyed my team last week, mm-hmm. And when things are starting to come to a close, you want to know where their heart is and what are the things they love about you specifically in the program, and what do we get right, what do we hit a home run on, and where do you feel like there were gaps. And I think that's one of the things that sometimes we miss as coaches is these athletes today, they're very honest. They're dying to tell you exactly what they think and feel, and we just sometimes have to make sure we're comfortable asking the why. And I think for some that can be uncomfortable, when you peel it back, but at the same time, that's where there's the most growth.
As a coach, do you have your players vote on the captains, or do you appoint captains? I know people have a different philosophy about that.
Yeah, no, that's certainly voted on by certainly the players. Mm-hmm. That's a process that they 100% take charge of. We have a leadership council that I work with, and we do conference calls all summer, bi-weekly meetings. I meet with the captains almost once a week in the season and during the off season. And, before I give them that opportunity to represent this program as captains, I sit down with them and make sure that they're prepared to take on that responsibility. But the voting process is done by the players.
Is that something you gleaned from somebody else, or where did you develop that from?
No, I mean, I think that over the time we've had to kind of evolve. I think, as I said, one of the major influences in the last few years for us has been a gentleman by the name of Tim Kite. He worked with Urban Meyer as well, and he continues to work with both our programs. He represents something called the R factor, and at the end of the day, without unpacking the whole thing, it speaks to above the line behavior, and it's basically a skill set, a training, if you will, that we've had now for going on 2 years. It's been really impactful. It speaks to developing, just a better, as you said, cutting out the things in your life that you think are below the line behaviors, and identifying the above the line behaviors, and ultimately getting the results that you're looking for based on the responses that you have to the events in your life.
I had the experience of seeing a team from Ohio at a Syracuse tournament, a summer tournament with travel teams. And there was this one team, I don't remember their names, but oh my God. I mean, I stood there and a cold chill went down my back as I saw the size, the speed, the stick skills. Is that an anomaly, or what is going on with lacrosse in the state of Ohio that you've seen?
I think big things. Yeah, I mean, I'm glad to hear you say that. I mean, I think for us, we have a little over a quarter of our roster is representative of Ohio, and what's been exciting recently, I mean, we had a freshman from Toledo this year, a sophomore from Cleveland. One of our captains is from right here in Columbus. Guy in our first midfield line was from Columbus. So not just guys on our roster, but guys that are really impacting us too. And, to your point, I think there are some really good athletes. I think that the game is being coached, as well as it ever has been. I think that's a big part of growth in any area or non-traditional area, if you will, is, our kids getting the right coaching at a young age. And I think as the game has grown, I think a big part of it, seeing areas like Oregon and Florida and Texas and California and Utah and Colorado, is that there's more and more people that know the game and have played the game that are impacting young men that want to get involved, and that helps a great deal. But I mean, I think for Ohio State, it's very exciting to see. We had record numbers of attendance the last 2 years. I think last year we were second only to Syracuse in home attendance. So, and that certainly speaks to, I think, the community and what we're trying to develop here. And we're hosting the quarterfinals this year. So a lot of positives in that sense.
Coach, when you think about the team that you want to put together, let's say all your players right now are seniors and they're going out the door, and you gotta rebuild. You got scholarships to the full amount. Where do you start? Are you starting with, I got to find the best goalie, I got to find the best defenseman? Are you looking for speed? How would you build a team? If somebody's listening to you and they want to know what does it mean to be Ohio State players, you're going to build your team from what area to what area is my question.
Yeah, well, I think you got to work. You win with people, and I think that's something that's outside my office. It's a quote from Coach Hayes. For me, you start with the assistants, and you got to make sure that you have the right people that really complement your vision for the program. Not only what it's going to look like on the field, but off. I've always believed that it's important to develop players, develop talent as important it is to bring talent in. I think where we've been really successful in the last 5 years, when you look at the guys we've had, I mean, we just had 2 players named we had the defensive player of the year in the Big Ten and the specialist of the year in the Big Ten, and both those guys were overlooked by a lot of folks. I mean, the specialist of the year, Jake Withers, wasn't recruited by anybody but Ohio State. And so I think we've been able to find guys that maybe from different areas, whether it's from Canada or non-traditional areas, or even hotbed areas. Robbie Haas, who was overlooked by several ACC schools at the time, and came here and really tried to develop them as players. So I think that's a big piece of it. And you need great assistant coaches to do that, and we've certainly had that here. Secondly, I think you want to find balance. You want to find, I think the goalie and face-off position are crucial. I think you got to make sure that you have an identity in those 2 areas of the field. I think that the style of play is something that we've always had some flexibility with in terms of what are our strengths, but I think you have to have non-negotiables in terms of core values of like who we are, how we compete. What are the things that are going to be staples, in terms of like, for example, we're going to clear the ball. We've been top 5 clearing for 5 or 6 years, and, ground ball play, defensive efficiencies, offensively, how we're going to operate. So I think once you get on the same page in terms of what you want that to look like and how you want to be competitive in terms of the fundamentals, and then you're going to go out and you're going to try to find young men that replicate some of those, those values, and certainly you feel like are guys that are hungry, that appreciate what it means to be a Buckeye, that fall in love with the school for all the right reasons, and have a passion and a hunger to get better, because this is a place, like I said, that gives you all the tools and all the resources you need to really develop as a lacrosse player and as a young man.
To check out our podcast archive, suggest show topics, and advertise on the show, and to book me as a guest and or speaker, visit our website, www.fredopie.com. That's www.fredopie.com. For information about advertising on the show, please email us at fdopie@gmail.com. That's fdopie@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and be good.